Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm your host, the bright and shiny Jeff Sandine. When I'm not surrounded by average technology and waiting for my back-ordered webcam, or glowing on webinars, I'm a certified financial planner and president of Sandine Strategies, a wealth management and financial planning firm. I'm also founder of Business Pros, the producer of today's webinar, titled Employer's Dilemma: Practical Planning to Effectively Implement the Distributed Workforce. We'll be featuring the panel of experts shown on your screen, who you'll meet in greater detail right before their presentations. Business Pros is an alliance of business professionals collaborating to bring high-quality educational content to entrepreneurs, business owners, and executives, as well as support each other's business development efforts. Here's how today's webinar will be structured. The three panelists, Jaime, David, and Monica, will each make 10-minute presentations. During these presentations, if you have a question, type it into the chat box. The chat function is displayed when you move your cursor over the Zoom screen and the icons down at the bottom. We'll answer those chat questions at the end of each presentation. Then open Q&A will occur after all three presentations are completed. Lastly, a link to the recording of this webinar will be emailed to all registrants. If everyone's ready, let's go ahead and proceed. Our moderator is Ken Barner. Kent is founder and principal of CIO Suite. He's a technical advisor and self-described mercenary chief information officer. He started CIO Suite in 2017 after a 37-year career in corporate America. CIO Suite provides strategic advisory services to mid-market C-level executives and business owners when technology matters. Their four areas of concentration are IT wellness, IT leadership, M&A, and projects, which Kent refers to as GSD, get stuff done. And I think that's the politically correct way of saying it.
That's right.
I'm going to unshare my screen now so that we can get started and turn it over to Ken.
Great, thank you. And thanks everybody for being here today. You know, we're talking about working from home or working from anywhere is the way I like to describe it. You know, and so our goal today is to shed light on what business owners, human resources, and technology departments need to know about work from anywhere pitfalls and policies. And so when the pandemic hit and we had the shelter in place, you know, we just literally cast all their employees out of your office. And so people had to get creative about how to get connected. And, you know, we're all using Zoom here, right? And, you know, we had this rapid adoption of Zoom because of all this, and their stock's going through the roof as well. But anyhow, so, you know, now's the time. That was a reactive. So now let's look at things proactively and take a step back and kind of reevaluate things. And so Jaime, excuse me, I'll do that more than once. David and Monica will shed lights in their specific areas. So Jaime, you're going to go first. And Jaime, he's CTO and partner of CMIT Solutions of Dallas, the White Rock and Highland Park areas. He works with his life partner. Many of us know her, Carmen. And then he was born in Colombia and immigrated to the U.S. when he was 4. From a very early age, he was motivated to pursue the American dream, and now he has it. He owns his own business. So Jaime has over 20 years of IT experience in just about every area of IT. He has many technology certifications and strives to always be able to translate the technical jargon into simple English, and that's no simple feat. He has his areas of expertise is IT security and risk management. And so
I think we lost your audio there. I'm on. Can you hear me?
There you go.
Okay. I lost your audio for a bit. All right. So let me share my screen here a second.
Okay.
All right, so thank you for the great introduction. I have a lot of stuff to go over, so I'm gonna just jump right into it and hopefully stay within my time period. Okay. So as far as my agenda, it's pretty short. Basically gonna go over the current state of IT and then go straight into recommendations and hopefully then cover some questions at the end. So at current, as everybody has experienced, there's been a big push due to COVID to move the workforce to be remote. In fact, 2/3 of all employees are currently working remotely. And in that process, both business and employees have found some benefits. So in a recent Gartner survey, they found that 3 out of 4 CFOs actually plan to shift at least 5% of their staff they have now currently that worked on site to be permanently remote. So there's some benefits there. And also another recent survey found that 2 out of 5 companies expect that remote work will go on for the long term. So it's here to stay and it'll be part of our work moving forward. And if you look at it at the long term, this is actually something that's happened over many years. Since about 2012, reports have shown the growth of work from home. So COVID basically just added gas to it and accelerated it. Now, straight into the recommendations. So now as you look to develop your own long-term strategy, I have the 10 recommendations I would recommend for you to consider as you develop that. And first and foremost is policies. Now, I know it's not glamorous, and I always imagine myself being a dentist when I talk policies, because it's like when you go to the dentist and they tell you, okay, you should floss every day, and everybody says, yeah, I should, but I always forget. Policies are kind of the same boat, but they're necessary because this is how you know that you and your staff are all on the same page, really. And really, the truth of it is, if it's not written down, it's not enforceable. So if you have them, it's a good time to review them, see if they still make sense. And if you don't, it's a good time to develop at least an acceptable use policy and a remote access policy. And if you need a template, I have a link at the bottom from SANS. They have plenty of templates you can use to modify for yourself. And also, the 2 things that you should remember about policies is that once you have created them, make sure you have documented that your staff have reviewed them and accepted them, and you place them somewhere where they're easily accessible for your staff for future reference. Okay, so we're all working from home now. Although most of us consider our home our castle, I have to say that your castle is not built with the kind of security that a real castle is built. In most instances, it's more close to a Starbucks wireless network. Not because of the number of people that are there, but because of the number of devices that are there that really weren't meant to be secure. So recommendations as far as securing your home network would be, make sure you have a router that gives you the ability to see who has connected to your network. Most of the new routers have apps that you can look on your phone. And if someone isn't supposed to be there, you can simply cut them off. Be aware that a lot of the newer routers also have added features that you can get at a pretty reasonable cost, or about $100 a year, where they add advanced security features like data loss protection and spam filters, all worthwhile if you're working from home. Most home networks also have a guest network. Now, the cool thing about a guest network is that it allows devices to join a different network, but on that network, you're not allowed to connect to anything on the home network. It just allows you to go to the internet. And this actually is perfect for your home business because you don't want your home work PC to be in contact with your home devices. So go home, rename that network, use a good password, and use that for your business. Also, remember, like when you're at the office, keep your devices updated at all times, and especially true of your antivirus and anti-malware software. 3, physical environment. I think if you have a good accountant, they usually tell you should have a specific area that you use for your business, your home business. That is a good IT recommendation as well. In that space, I would also add that if you have any devices that might eavesdrop on your conversation, like an Alexa, Echo, or a home Google device, you should probably move that away from that area or disable the microphone. Like when you're at the office, you should lock your machine when you walk away. Cover the camera when you're not in a conference call. Use a battery backup so that if there's a storm and the power goes out, you don't lose your data. And also, if you're sharing that space, make sure you're complying with the current distance requirements. And also make sure that anything that's high touch, like your phone, your keyboard, you also clean and sanitize on a regular basis. Password control. Passwords have recently been, recommendations have recently been changed so that NIST now recommends that you only change the password when it's needed, not on a regular basis like they did before, because they found that actually increased risk. So definitely do that. And also, as you grow your remote access or your remote workforce, look at centralizing identity and password management in the cloud. Services like Okta or OneLogin or Azure that comes with your Office license allows you to control the identity and the passwords in the cloud. That way your staff can connect from anywhere to your network. Also, if you want to be future-proof, look at products from a company called Hyper or Secret Octopus that don't use any passwords at all. They just use the functionality on your phone, like your Face ID or your fingerprint. Review current infrastructure and equipment. Now, you've had for several months now where you've been working remotely, and you've probably come across things that just don't work. If you have a server that you had network shares on, you couldn't connect to, you have phone systems, as mentioned before, that you forgot to forward, and therefore you're not getting your messages. If you find that your VPN or your remote access was not able to support all the staff connecting in as once, then you should really look at solutions to improve that, and then categorize those and implement them over time as needed. With video conferencing, please make sure to train your staff on the security aspects of those services. Enable encryption, create different login passwords each time are examples. And also look at different providers. I know Zoom is very popular now, but it also has the biggest target. So if you find another product that might save you a little money and actually provides the services that you need, definitely take advantage of those. Phishing actually has increased by about 600% during this COVID time period. So definitely, whether you do it yourself or you outsource it, teach your staff how to identify phish and scam emails. This is the #1 way people get hacked. So if you don't have it yet, definitely add a spam filter. Good providers are Microsoft, Barracuda, Sophos, and Symantec. It really will decrease your risk and the number of headaches that you have. Don't overshare online. Anything you put online can and will be used against you. If you don't want people to know about it, don't put it online. And train your staff, and it should be in your policy somewhere, that you're a brand ambassador for the company. Things that you do outside of work can come back to bite you if they don't align with your company. And that should be also in your policy somewhere. Some technical solutions that you can put in place to prevent this type of thing would be a DLP or a data loss solution that looks at the traffic leaving your network and then takes out things that might be considered confidential or inappropriate, or DNS filters, which look at the sites that you're reaching out to connect to, and if they're known bad locations or sites, you're not allowed to go to those sites. Take backup seriously. In your policy, you should also instruct your staff and your whole company, when you're not in the office, where should you store your work files and folders? Ideally, if you use like a OneDrive or Google or Microsoft cloud storage, that should be where you put it. It makes it easier to control and back up. Don't assume that your cloud service protects your data. You should definitely look at your service agreements and see where the line begins and ends. For example, if you look at Microsoft email, in their service agreement, they recommend that you use a third party to back up your data, something a lot of people don't do. For laptops that are used by critical staff, you should definitely take an image backup and follow the rule of 3-2-1, which basically says, have 3 copies of the data on 2 different media, one of those being in the cloud. That way you're always secure. And lastly, number 10, start looking at virtual desktop. That is where the future is going. If you look at Microsoft and Amazon, they're the leaders in the space. And it's something that makes a lot of the things I just mentioned before easier to implement. Now, don't assume that it's going to save you money. Normally, when you go from an on-site to a cloud, it's going to cost a little bit more, but it'll eliminate headaches and give you added functionality. And those are my 10. Hopefully, I stayed within my 10 minutes.
You did. You did great. Thank you.
Thanks.
If anybody has any questions for Jamie, go ahead and put them in the chat. David, if you'd queue up to get ready to go next. I don't see any questions.
That's me. I mute myself.
Oh my goodness. So when I was trying to tell Jeff about this seminar, he thought it was all about technical. And that's part of it, certainly. That's why Jaime was talking. But, you know, there's HR, risk, legal, there's all sorts of other areas that need to be addressed. And that's why we've got David here. And then Monica will be next, talking about the legal aspect. So let me introduce David real quick. So David is a human resources executive, people talent and leadership consultant, author, speaker, community volunteer, and a combat veteran. David is senior principal for HR Catalyst Consulting. His career experience spans public corporations, privately owned companies, and private equity firms as an HR executive. Now, I didn't know this, David. This is interesting. David is a U.S. Army combat veteran, having served in Operation Desert Storm, where he was awarded the Bronze Star Medal and the Army Commendation Medal of Valor for his combat service and heroism, excuse me, under enemy fire before resigning his commission. And then he's also a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. And now I know what a slacker I am. So let's turn this over to David, and you take us through the HR side of things.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate it. And thank you for everyone being on the call today. I hope that you and your families are healthy and safe out there. As we've mentioned, we're going to be talking about work from home. And there are some lessons that we've learned so far from remote working with regard to the last several weeks. And now we're getting into months with individuals now working remotely. And then I'll also make some passing comments about considerations for returning to the workplace. I know some of you have already made some decisions out there to bring your folks back to the workplace, but if not, there are some things that you need to keep in mind going forward with those decisions. First off, I think everyone knows that the remote working has been something that has transformed how businesses are operating today, and it's going to leave its mark on us. Whether it's a positive or negative will yet to be seen. But the real challenge that still remains out there is how do we continue to operate our businesses at an effective level so that we can continue thriving and be at a profitable level within our community, business community. Now, remote work has some advantages. Working remotely has really contributed a lot to the productivity of the workplace. And a lot of that is due to the fact that people are spending less time wasted, particularly in commutes, particularly in the office, doing things that are non-productive. And we're finding that there's more productivity, greater focus and concentration due to the fact that there's more time available, more flexible work schedules. We're also finding that there's less attrition, fewer sick days being taken by employees, and shorter break times, obviously, because of the lack of social contact. But that lack of social contact is also creating some disadvantages. What we're finding more on the individual level is that workers are isolated. Obviously, working at home where you're removed from your work teams can create elements of loneliness. Also, I recall when I first went to work remote several years ago, you have a tendency to want to be online all the time. So as soon as you woke in the morning until you were going in bed, you felt like you had to be available. So there's some burnout that's happening out there with some workers who are still trying to adapt and adjust to working remotely. Also, workers are off rhythm, where they used to have a routine of coming in, checking email, going to get a cup of coffee, coming back, preparing for a meeting, and on throughout their day. They're now a little bit more off their routine, and they're missing some of the cues that you would find in the workplace by bumping into people in the halls or seeing what folks are talking about with regard to projects or other things going on. So that's another disadvantage. And then finally, we've got some teams that are going home, large teams that are losing some other direction. They're lacking some clarity in that, to no one's fault, but great distances create some delays in decisions and conversations. So let's talk a little bit about what we need to do to go forward from here. How can we ensure our companies continue to be successful in this work environment? There are some challenges that we're going to need to know and understand so that we can address as we go forward, thinking about the remote workplace. Three major challenges that I want to address today that have come out of most recent experience in this is around structure. Obviously, what you had in the office doesn't translate as easily. Leadership, and we'll talk briefly about leadership and where it's being tested. And then also communication. Obviously, with the distance now between us and our employees, there's some communication challenges that come to the forefront. Let's first talk about structure. The economic downshift, and I call it a downshift. It's not a downturn. We've just kind of taken ourselves foot off the pedal a little bit until we get through and find a better way of being able to interact as human beings. That combined with the rise of remote work has resulted in some changes in how employees work, how it's structured, and their routine. The nature of work is one of those areas that we have learned that some jobs have evaporated. Consumer trends, the way businesses have now had to adapt to the COVID-19 meant that some jobs have gone away, particularly in the consumer-facing business. But there are ways to work around that. One of the examples Kent shared with me earlier in the month was the story of the Microsoft store. The Microsoft store saw that they needed to close their consumer-facing sites, whether they were located in malls or freestanding, and they found themselves with a workforce that had no work. However, hand in hand with that, their online business was skyrocketing. People were shifting from the consumer retail to the online retail. And so they repurposed, retrained, and they shifted those employees to work in support of the online retail. Think about that in your own business before we think about furloughs and layoffs, because we just don't have that work. Is there a way to repurpose and redirect our folks to help in this environment of remote working and also new consumer trends and new business trends? Clarity. A lot of large teams that were accustomed to a command and control system that helped them throughout the course of their work and what they were doing have somewhat been altered, a little bit of upended with the remote work scenario here. One of the things that teams are learning, or companies are learning, is to focus more on reducing the size of these teams, creating smaller cross-functional teams where you have some representation from different departments with clear goals and objectives, creates a nimbler and more responsive way of working remotely. Consider how that might work in your business and if you're sending folks home, but smaller, more capable teams are the answer to go there. We'll talk about leadership quickly, and whether you're in the office or in a remote location, leaders are always having the challenge of leading people. And a lot of that comes to the core of the relationships they have and how they balance the aspects of trust and accountability. With regard to trust, it's even now more critical in this remote work environment. It can be said, if you had a low level of trust with your employees prior to this remote work scenario, or you had a high level of trust with your employees, it's amplified now with remote work. So if there was a low level of trust, it's probably even lower now as you sent people back out to their remote workplaces, and then vice versa. Trust is an item that's established based on a relationship that's reciprocal. 4 elements of that are, and it goes both ways. Leaders have to earn the trust of their employees, and employees have to trust their leaders as well. The 4 core elements that we look at is having competence, knowing how to do your job and being good at it. Principles, knowing that you have a good set of ethical and moral values to make good decisions when those scenarios or interactions happen that require it. Character, and In the face of adversity, are you bringing courage to that? In the face of failure, are you being resilient? And in the face of success, are you being humble and showing humility in those situations? And then finally, wisdom, being able to use your knowledge, your experience, and your instincts, and being patient to guide others, but also learn from others. Those are the core elements of trust, and you need to find opportunities to continue to develop these relationships. Find time with your employees in the remote locations to sit down and talk about their competence. Sit down and try to develop their competence, talk about values, talk about their character, and continue to try to strengthen those relationships. Another area is accountability, and I will tell you, accountability is an outflow of trust. If you don't have a high level of trust, then you're probably going to be trying to hold your folks more accountable, or at least find methods to do so. And then vice versa, if you have a high level of trust, you have probably less need of trying to measure what people are doing. And people are measured based on their activity, their outputs, or maybe both. There are solutions for you to include work monitoring systems that our technology colleagues can help guide us with. If you're in a call center or contact center environment, they've been using that type of monitoring for some time. But if you're in a situation where you need to know whether your folks are getting their work done, that might be something to consider. However, there are some considerations there with regard to privacy and also with regard to how to use that information. On the other side, if you have a high level of trust with your employees, then consider doing some daily check-ins just to check on their actual activity and their output, and have a two-way conversation. But accountability is an important thing to ensure you have with a strong relationship. And then let me talk about communication. Obviously, we're sitting here in a communication forum that we probably didn't think about a year ago. But communication has been upended. And the way organizations are dealing with communication are different. We've had some companies that have sent employees home and have, I would say, for lack of a better word, over-communicated. There's some data out there that says that employees are in 10 hours worth of meetings or one-on-ones in a week. And that's non-productive time in terms of work. Whereas there's other companies that sent employees home and then they just went radio silent, no communication at all. You've got to find a good balance and a good rhythm for that. You've got to understand why you're communicating, who you're communicating to, one-on-one or one-to-many people or many-to-many, and then how to communicate. So I'm going to show you a little chart here in just a moment about some channels to consider. And then when. As I mentioned a while ago, doing some check-ins for the accountability piece, it's also an important thing to have a daily, weekly, monthly rhythm for your employees to break through that loss of routine. So how you communicate and when you do it also contributes to the fact of getting more of a routine to your employees. 10 hours seems to be a little high. Find a way of making sure you keep communication lines open, but with a minimal use of hours to avoid wasted time. Here's a chart that McKinsey came up with that I'll show briefly, and I'll be happy to share if you contact me later. But it kind of gives you a guideline as to the different channels that are easily available to us right now and what their best use is for. Obviously, everything on the left side are things that we've already seen, the one-on-one phone call or video conference, the video conferences we're doing now, how we should use chats and emails, but also the video captures and voice notes. Each of them have a different purpose in terms of how you would use it for your business. So consider that information and think about how you're using the different communication channels you have at your fingertips to use. Now, eventually this curve is going to flatten. Our businesses are going to flourish again, and we're going to be faced with this decision of when do we bring our employees back or how do we bring our employees back, and that's going to confront us. Some things to consider include answering a few questions. Before you have a full-scale return, what's the risk in our workplace? How do we adapt our work to this pandemic? What do we do if someone else or someone in the office becomes infected? And then what if an employee wants to continue working remotely? These are just a handful of questions that you're going to face if you bring employees back to the workplace. So 4 areas that I would highly encourage you to consider as you're out there making these decisions. One is risk assessment. Make sure you audit your workplace. Make sure you have a plan, but refer to your federal, state, local guidelines to ensure that you're addressing the necessary areas to make your workplace safe, and keep your employees informed of the risks that are out there. Also, work practices. Make sure you're adhering to the health official guidelines with everything we've heard from washing hands, social distancing, PPE. But you're going to have to rethink how you're going to be using common areas in your workplace. How are you going to be making sure that your vendors that are helping you out with disinfecting and cleaning are handling it? And then how are you going to engage now in meetings and activities that at one time were taken for granted in terms of how close people were interacting? Just have to have a think through and a walk through in your mind and get some help from your team. Crisis response, it may happen. You're going to have someone come forward and say they've got COVID-19. And when that notification comes, you're going to have to determine how you're going to respond. We advise there's 4 levels of response. One is directly to that employee. One is with the broader workforce. And then one has to do with how you respond with the workplace in terms of your disinfecting and how you're going to ensure you get that workplace back online. And then finally, when it's appropriate, how do you respond to the business and to your stakeholders, your customers and your vendors? As it says up on the screen here, business continuity should be first and foremost in your mindset as you're thinking through all these, but you should always have employee health on your mind as well. Finally, work policies. If you're coming back into the workplace, there has been a lot of legislative changes that have happened. There's a lot of activity happening between individuals and businesses. Monica will join us here shortly and talk about some of those, but be prepared to have these policies to address accommodations in the workplace, how you handle employees who do not want to come back into the workplace. And if you're one of those employers who does not want to have masks worn in the office and you have an employee who wishes to wear a mask, you're going to deal with that as well from a legal standpoint. With that, all we can do is hope for the best, plan for the worst. Ultimately, you've got to choose the path that's best for you. But again, there's not a single approach that everyone can join in and use. Focus on your business continuity and make sure you keep your employees healthy is the path to take if you have a choice to make out there. Kent, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you again for the opportunity.
All right.
And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, David. Great advice. There are no questions. There was one, but you answered it. So we're hitting on all cylinders here. Let's go on to, there's going to be all kinds of legal things that are going to come up, and Monica is going to talk to us about that. She's a partner with Estes Thorne and Carr, PLLC. Practice areas are labor and employment law, arbitration, mediation, ADR, investigations, non-competes and trade secrets, human resource compliance, and training. Monica enjoys advising businesses from all industries on labor and employment matters. She leverages her experience and knowledge as a certified human resources professional to help businesses navigate the most complex employment situations in the hopes of avoiding litigation, but also strengthening the relationship between management and employees. However, she also litigates disputes before the Texas Workforce Commission, the EEOC, DOL, state and federal courts, and other state and federal regulatory bodies. Before private practice, Monica served as an assistant Ohio Attorney General and defended the state and county agencies as well as universities against simple and complex employment disputes before state and federal courts. She also served as a human resource policy attorney for the state of Ohio, where she wrote laws, rules, policies pertaining to the personnel processes and functions for close to 100,000 employees. And she enjoys working with businesses from all industries and with offices nationally and internationally. So we're in good hands here. Monica, take it away. You're mute.
Thank you. I'm not quick on the draw. Thank you for having me. I'm going to go over obviously some legal points, but really my role here is to support what Jaime and David have said, I guess from the legal perspective, in that, let me go ahead and forward my, maybe, hold on. Okay. Hold on 1 second. I'm having some, there we go. All right. Can everybody see a dog on the screen?
Yeah.
All right, I'm just making sure that, because I have issues with technology. I put this in here because this is not my dog, but that's pretty much the view that I've had lately. So I'm sure everybody can commiserate with that. So, and he's cute. So to go over just some points about policies. Now, this is not everything. This is tailored more towards a work from home. But what do you want to include? And I'm going to give the highlights. The first thing is, if you're going to have a policy, which I recommend, define what work from home is. And I say that because there's a difference between work from home and remote working. Right now, it's slightly harder to do remote working because that would be like going to a Starbucks. And some companies were doing that before. But it's a little bit harder, I suppose, with the social distancing. But there are still some there's places where people could go, and you have to decide as an employer if you want them at home or you want them remote. So I would just put something in the policy on that, and it kind of goes to the security issue, but also the trust issue. Where are they? If they're at Starbucks and getting macchiatos all day long, are they really working? Maybe they're working a lot more and you're okay with that because they're hyped up on macchiatos. So another thing to include, and this is really honestly the most important thing in my opinion on what to do with a work from home policy, what the first line should be something along the lines of working from home is a privilege, not a right. And I say that right now we're sort of under lockdown, and it's kind of, especially in some states, they are, it's still, you got to work from home. But in general, you want to have the ability as the employer to stop the process. And this comes up in litigation every once in a while of a poor performing employee who has a disability and they want to work from home. Well, if it's a privilege, not a right, then that might not be an available accommodation. So it's just something to have in there that it's, this is at the employer's discretion. And these are obviously in normal times. Define which positions are eligible for working from home, because I know this sounds like an obvious statement, but not every position can be done from home. But there are some positions like, say, for example, receptionists. In some companies that may work from home, and some no, because they need to be there. You need to make sure that your policy, it kind of alerts everybody so that somebody doesn't think, well, why can't I work from home? I could easily do the same thing at home. And then you get potential discrimination, harassment, retaliation, unequal treatment. Also define the parameters which make an employee eligible for working from home. For example, I have clients that have policies such as, they have to have had no reprimands within the last quarter or year or whatever. Their production rate needs to be at a certain level. You don't have to have these, but it's helpful if you do have parameters, because then you can refer back to it if somebody makes the request and say they have 20 disciplines on their file and for some reason they haven't been terminated. They should probably not be able to work from home. So that's something important to have in there. Also define some other parameters, and especially now with more people working from home, if this is something that matters to the employer, make sure that the employee knows they can only work Monday through Friday. They can't work Saturday and Sunday. They have to work 8 to 5. They can't work 2 to 10. That might work for some employers, but some employers it doesn't, especially if you're going to be monitoring workload. And the other advantage of this is it helps cut down on potential overtime issues, because they're logging in the middle of the night and now they all of a sudden have to get paid. And again, that's up to the employer. It's totally fine. Some people are night owls and they work better at night and you get more out of them. That's great, but you need to consider that. And include a statement that the technology is the employer's and it may be searched. And I'm going to go into this with the cybersecurity, with the security monitoring. But this is important. Employees need to know that even if it's their own computer, whatever they're working on, that is something that becomes the employer's, or is obviously owned by the employer, and that it can be searched. So that you can, in case there's issues, you can have access to it. And then update or develop a social media policy. And I'm throwing this in here, not because it's a work from home topic necessarily, but what I have found is more people have, with work from home, have more time on their hands because they're not commuting, and they are online a lot more. Plus they're at home, they've got multiple screens, the boss is not looking over their shoulder, they're maybe on Facebook. You need to make sure that your social media policy, one, I would encourage that you have one, but two, that you make sure it's compliant with the National Labor Relations Board. And the other thing that's going on right now is because of the political discourse that's ramping up towards the election, and then also with the protests, this is becoming an issue. So I would just say have a policy on social media, whatever that is, just make sure you have one. All right, remote monitoring. What is legal? On a federal level, monitoring is legal. And I'm throwing this in here because I get questions from employees that want me to represent them, and they think that the employer can't search their computer, they can't watch what they're doing, because there's lots of forums on, you can go to Google and find any answer you want, basically, that's going to support what you think, right? So I like to throw out to employers, yes, you can monitor. I would encourage you to monitor. Not be a micromanager stalker, but just make sure you know what your employees are doing. But to be careful, there are states that do have consent laws. Texas is not really one of them, but I'm throwing that out there just in case it's an employer that has multiple employees in different states. Just if you include a statement in your computer use policy that the employee is consenting to monitoring, or that they know that the computer is not private, their email is not private, their activity is not private, that is how you become in compliance with the consent laws in most of the states. Maybe not California because they're nuts, but I think even there it would comply. So, and really honestly, you can monitor anything that is on the computer owned by the employer, or a computer that the employee is using, and that may include their personal email if they're logging in. And a lot of employees don't understand that. They think that the employer can't see their email. And in reality, there are ways, and I'm sure Jaime could explain this, but you've got this remote view mirroring concept that I've had my clients use. And so they need to understand that what they're doing on the employer's computer is not private. There is no expectation of privacy. The Fourth Amendment does not apply. All right, you can monitor the keystrokes and screen contents, and this is this remote view. This is not anything new. Companies will do this. Like, say for example, an insurance company, they have the adjusters. They look at this stuff. They look at when they're in the computer, how fast they're working, all that kind of stuff. That's perfectly legal. You can also monitor phone conversations if you have a legitimate reason or with consent through a policy. Now, in Texas, if you call somebody, as long as you know that you're recording, it's legal. But my advice would be to just let the people know that, all right, if you're on an employer's phone or on whatever and it's being monitored, it could be monitored. It's just better to give them notice. All right, so what about their personal devices or computers? It's basically the same thing. If they're using their own computer or laptop at home, it becomes the employer's. So it is, the consent flows to the personal computer. And in essence, create a policy that includes the above and anything else you want to throw out as policy, but definitely includes the things that we have all talked about today. And the important part about the policy from the legal standpoint is to make sure, and Jaime said this as well, that you make sure you keep a record that they accepted it. My advice is to go a step further. You maybe keep a paper copy, but what I like to do is some sort of a a virtual, like they've read receipt, and you've got like an electronic record also. But the other thing is, what I like to do is break down policies. There are certain policies that I think it's worth it to have as a separate self-standing policy that also has a consent. Social media is one of them. Computer use is another one of them. At will status, just I'm gonna throw that in there because it's a freebie, and disciplinary action. Because in reality, you know, a lot of handbooks are like 45 pages long, and employees are like, yeah, this is great, and they don't read it. So whereas if you have this, especially social media and computer use, go over it with people in the onboarding process, or make sure that maybe if you have if it's an online thing, they have to scroll down before they can consent. And then they cannot say that they did not know that you were going to be watching them. So that is important. And that comes up more than you would think. Another thing about policies is, it's just really, the thing about policies is, one, to have them, two, to follow them, not make all kinds of amendments for your favorite people, and then equal enforcement, because that is where employers mess up. They say, oh, well, that's a stupid policy, or, you know, you're a good employee, I don't want to do this. So it's just make sure that you've got equal treatment to the people that you're enforcing the policy against. And another thing is, explain. Make sure that the people understand certain policies, like social media. They know exactly what they can and can't put on social media. They can't say, F the employer, you know, they suck. But they might be able to say, I hate my employer because they don't pay me enough. Stuff like that. It's just going to help you down the road. And another thing on remote monitoring is, and Jaime went into this, but I want to reinforce, on the, what has come up with this work from home thing is not only the Alexa spying, and I think the Samsung TVs, and, you know, I'm putting on my tinfoil hat right now. You do have to watch for that. And the reason why is, one, there might be some private information, but particularly trade secrets, when they are not protected and they get out into the public domain, but really it's more of the intent of how hard are you trying to protect your trade secrets as an employer, then you lose the protection potentially. So if Alexa, you know, is out there and then it shows up on Google or whatever, I don't know how that works, but it seems like every time I'm someplace and I'm talking about something, I get an ad for the thing and I'm like, what? This is crazy. But anyway, just watch it and make sure that you tell people, you know, like Jaime said, don't have your Alexa sitting next to your computer, or don't have Siri on your iPhone. Another thing is a password use policy. I know he went over that, but it's important to make sure that people understand that they have to log out when they leave the area. They, you know, if you require this, cover up the camera in case there's sensitive documents on the desk. Another thing is family or visitors that might be coming in and out of the house. And, you know, even though if they're a 5-year-old walking by the desk, be like, Daddy was just talking about the new merger between the two companies. That could potentially be an issue. And this is, you know, you just need to encourage your employees to make sure that they understand if they're talking about something sensitive, they need to go someplace else, make sure there's a closed door, it's a, you know, whatever. That's important to show that you at least tried to comply. Not that maybe the employees are going to follow it, but you as the employer tried to make them. All right. So I can't do a presentation anymore without putting a murder hornet in here. I'm not going to talk about murder hornets, but I think that they're awesome because I haven't seen one in person. But here is one thing I wanted to throw out there on working from home. OSHA still technically applies at home. And OSHA has actually come out and said, no, they're not going to do inspections of employees' homes. And no, a normal workplace, a normal injury at home is not going to be workplace hazards and all that kind of stuff. But then, typical to the government, and I can say this because I worked there, they were like, but there's still the general duty clause, and if an employee is injured at home while working, then it could be. an OSHA event. Well, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean like if the computer blows up because they've got bad circuitry? Maybe, I don't know. So I always advise people, my clients, to be like, just make sure that you tell your employees to have a safe workplace. Don't have exposed wires hanging from the ceiling where they're working. Don't stand in water while they're on the computer. I'm being ridiculous, but you'd be amazed what employees do. I'm sure David has fun stories also. Workers' comp also is becoming a thing. There are actually, I think we're up to 14 states now where if, now this is not necessarily for just working from home, but if you have a hybrid situation where you're going back and forth with employees, if they contract COVID-19 and they're at work, it's presumed to be a workers' comp event in some states. In Texas, they would have to show that they were exposed to it and they got it, which is probably going to be hard to prove, but my guess is that's, they're going to kind of err on the side of maybe. And this is important for Texas employers because in Texas, it's the only state that you can be a non-subscriber, and which means that you bear the burden of any workers' comp. You just have to pay for it. You're flying without a parachute unless you have a third-party plan. So if one of your employees gets workers' comp and you're on the hook, what does that mean? So just be careful. And with all that, what basically the way to best safeguard to a certain extent is to follow OSHA guidance, to follow CDC guidance, to follow the EEOC pandemic response guidance as far as cleaning and personal protective equipment and things of that nature to show that the employer was trying to be compliant. And if the employee had an accident or contracted COVID, then it's their fault. So that's just something to keep in mind.
So
Right.
Monica.
Yeah.
We need to allow some time for questions.
Okay.
It's 12:24 and I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Okay.
So sorry.
Can I have like 2 more minutes or sorry, am I past my 10 or no?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Oh my God. I thought I was going to be short. All right. I will cut it off here.
Well, you can keep going. If somebody has questions, please enter them in the chat and we'll let Monica wrap up because I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay. Real quick, timekeeping. Make sure you set the work hours. But the other thing is if you have exempt employees and they are working from home, they get paid for the whole week regardless of how many hours they are working. So just, I wanted to throw that out there because some people don't know that. That means exempt from overtime under the Fair Labor Standards Act. And then finally, this is just a list of the current lawsuits. As of today, there are about 2,500, I believe, and or 3,500. 285 of them are by employees. So this is the list of what's the topics are, and it's across the board. So just be careful of following the laws and how you treat your people.
So I did get a question here. Should social media policy be platform-wise or just related to content?
I guess I don't understand. Platform, what does that mean?
So I used to work for a financial services company, and when it came to LinkedIn, we had LinkedIn profiles for the financial advisors, but they would it wasn't their personal, it was a company, that's how we manage LinkedIn and compliance and all that kind of stuff. So maybe that's kind of where they're going.
It applies to anything. It's anything that's work related or work sponsored, but also private. If you have say you're a Joe employee and you go on Facebook and talk about the employer, in some instances that is protected if you're talking about the terms and conditions of employment. But if you're just, trashing the employer, it's probably not. But so it can be private or professional.
Okay.
Kent, can I interject for just a second?
You can. I think
we're
Tom Allen has it.
We're coming up on 12:30 and we're going to go as long as there are questions. So feel free to stay. And Tom Allen is asked to ask a question. I'm going to unmute you, Tom, and you could just go ahead and shoot your question away at David.
Okay, so here's the deal. There's all this work at home craziness. A good friend of mine, called up, and she had just gotten her performance review. Now, my sense is she's really good at her job, but in the performance review, they kind of laid into her about not being able to effectively run a video conference and work remotely and being technically challenged. And so she's kind of bumfuzzled. And I don't know what should she do? I mean, should she do anything?
You know, Tom, this is David. I'll kind of address that, and then I may have Monica weigh in. I think if anything for this individual, she may sit down with her direct supervisor and say, please outline exactly those areas that I'm not performing well in, and give her an opportunity to see exactly what areas she'll determine whether she needs some additional training. There could be a chance they never really properly trained it on her, or she may do some self-study on that and then ask to know exactly what the standard is, what they want of her. If it's just a matter of fumbling through, which I did a moment ago on sharing screens and unmuting, those might be some harsh things to be addressing in a performance review. But I don't know, Monica, if you want to weigh in on that.
I agree with everything, and I am seeing this more because technology has become essential during the pandemic, but she's right to be like, what the heck, you didn't give me any training, maybe give me a chance. What I am noticing is employers are pointing things out more in what I call papering the file in case there are layoffs or rifts that have to happen, or disciplinary action for downsizing. So I definitely would follow up with the employer and ask exactly what it is and how could she get some training and things like of that nature, so that in case she does get let go, if there's any protected class that she's part of, it could be, there could be a claim. But that's happening a lot.
I think she just felt like she really got blindsided, because normally, I mean, her day job, she knows what she's doing and does really well, but then they just focused on all of this. And it's consistent with what I'm dealing with personally. My wife's a speech therapist, and her and the group of 5 therapists were all sent home to work with zero training on how to do remote therapy and remote video conferencing and how to do a therapy with a child, including whether or not the child even has a computer or internet. So that's what it's all very consistent that there's a lot of things that aren't working very well, but it could work well if we went back to, I forgot who was talking about it, but if leadership would take the responsibility to train and set expectations and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's true, COVID and non-COVID. Some employers are better than others, but yeah, I agree.
So Michael Battaglia has a question. So has any panelist looked at virtual office environment such as walkabout workspace? What are their thoughts about an environment such as how it helps with isolation, connection, team building, security issues? I don't have any direct experience with walkabout, so I can't answer that. I don't know if anybody else on the call has any experience with that.
I'm not familiar with the name, but I'm assuming it's the one where it's like a virtual space where you can see virtual. Yeah, I've seen those, and unfortunately they haven't picked up a lot here locally. But definitely an option, but I don't think it's popular yet. I think
I have a suggestion. Why don't we unmute Michael, and if he can clarify his question.
Sure.
That would be good. So Michael, do you want to give us specifics on what you're asking?
Well, I mean, they're not virtual offices. I just became part of one where you basically have a space with other employees. You have a view of your office environment. You could see who's in the office, who's out. You could walk over and have a virtual meeting with them by clicking on a button. And the idea is to give you a presence in the office and a way to connect with people and stay connected. I know, David, you were talking a little bit about isolation and communications and kind of whole idea of presence. And I just didn't know if anybody had looked at that or had any thoughts or knowledge about how that works.
So I've used Microsoft Teams before, and you may use that. I'm not sure if you do or not, but it has presence. It's not visual presence. It's just, it tells you whether or not that person's on the computer. If they're busy, they can mark, I'm not available right now, and then fire up a video chat, real easy.
Kent, did you see the presentation by Tony Portman at Success North Dallas a few weeks ago? about the
did not.
virtual workspace? It's a little more like what I'll go with Jamie. Jamie said it's actually looks like a virtual rendition of your office, and you can see where people are, and you can get up and walk over even though you're not physically anywhere. It's kind of a neat idea. It looks like it might be, I don't know how hard it would be to use. I can tell you, I've been to a virtual trade show like that, and it's works remarkably well. You're actually walking around a trade show, except you're not physically there, but all the images are there, and you can walk into a booth and talk to somebody and everything.
Yeah.
So I think
Was
it
that-
may be more what Michael was talking about, if I had to guess.
So was the guy at Success North Dallas the walkabout?
That was Tony Portman, a woman.
Oh,
You probably should, sure you've met her. She's kind of all over the place.
okay.
I'm going to jump in and say that the only advice that I would have for that would be that if you, just like in the office, if you have a policy of respect others' time, and because if you can just literally pop in virtual on the computer, it's going to be the same thing as somebody coming in the office and hanging out, and that might be annoying. So that would be my 2 cents on that. And it might scare the crap out of somebody. They're online, all of a sudden pops up, I don't know.
Probably so.
Would me.
Kent, do you have any final questions for the panelists?
Well, if there's one takeaway from each of you, like, be sure you do this one thing. And I know it's hard to boil it all down, but Jaime?
I always start with number 1, policies. Create those
Okay.
policies.
Yep.
Don't put in IT solutions that don't have a policies that it supports.
David, you got any parting thoughts?
I would talk to communication. Just figure out how to get a good balance and talk to your employees about it in terms of making sure that you're building good relationships and communicating them effectively.
Yeah. And Monica?
Yeah, I'm going to say communication. Create a plan that works for the employer. It might be a hybrid, it might be all work from home, it might be all in office, but you're not going to know that unless you talk to your people and then have a policy.
Yeah.
I'll make
All
a
right,
comment,
fantastic. Yes, sir, you can.
I've been on a lot of webinars lately. This was maybe one of the best ones I've been on. Very organized, relevant information, good topic. So I appreciate
for
you
the
guys
feedback.
doing this. I enjoyed listening to you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, sorry,
Jeff?
we're gonna have to end there, but I'm gonna throw up their contact information. Oh, Monica, will you unshare your screen?
I would love to do that. Hold on.
There you go. So let's give Jaime, David, Monica, and Ken a virtual round of applause for their contributions today. I know they just scratched the surface on their topics. So if you have any other questions, reach out to them. We're going to make a replay or a recording of this session available. It's going to get emailed out to everybody, so you'll have a chance to rewatch it. And there's their contact information if you want to write it down. Want to talk for a minute about Business Pros. Our group is organized to offer high quality educational content like today, and our 28 members are available to help business owners in just about any capacity. If you have any questions about the resources our group provides, please contact me.
So we had somebody from India on.
Yeah, we did. We had, I don't know if she stayed though.
Well, I
Yeah.
think she called in via her phone.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I think she's still on. Hello.
Hello, India. Thanks for coming.
Yep, she says she's still here.
Okay. Well,
Sorry about that.
welcome from New Delhi, India. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we're putting together a slate of webinars for the rest of the year. It looks like we'll be doing a couple a month. And our next one is Thursday, July 30th. We can thank Ken Barner for the title, and he's going to be the moderator of this one. Robots don't get COVID-19, so start your journey to industrial robotics automation. It'll be structured for CEOs and owners of manufacturing companies looking to deploy industrial robots to automate their repetitive processes. So I want to encourage everybody to join us for that. That's on Thursday, July 30th. Save the date. One last thing I have is Melanie Schaefer couldn't join us. She's from Talent Suite. She has a packet of how personality profiles can help determine how people are going to work in a remote situation. And she's offered that to everybody in the group. So if you want a copy of that presentation or want to get in touch with Melanie, just shoot an email to me and I'll get that message over to her. So I greatly appreciate all of you taking time out of your day today. Thank you, everyone, and make it a great day. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.